The fire is built and waiting. A crowd has gathered in the stadium at Smyrna to watch an old man burn. He is 86 years old. He has been offered every chance to walk away. He only has to say a few words. Swear by the fortune of the emperor, curse the name of a carpenter who had died more than 100 years before, and the fire will go cold, and he will go home. He will not say them. We know what happens to him in unusual detail, not from legend, not from a chronicle written down centuries later by men who never saw it. We know because the people who watched him die sat down soon afterward and wrote it all out in a letter and sent it to another church a few days' journey away. That letter survived. It is the oldest account of a Christian martyrdom outside the New Testament, and scholars do not seriously doubt that it is real. His name is Polycarp. He is the Bishop of Smyrna, a port city on the coast of what is now Turkey. And on this afternoon, he is one of the last men alive who had stood in the same room as the apostles of Jesus Christ. As a young man, Polycarp had known John. John the man, the disciple, grown old, the one who had outlived the others. We have it from a student of Polycarp's named Irenaeus, who as a boy had sat and listened to the old bishop speak. Irenaeus remembered it into his own old age. He remembered the place where Polycarp used to sit. He remembered the way he told of having spoken with John and with others who had seen the Lord with their own eyes. Polycarp had heard it directly from the men who were there. Irenaeus heard it from Polycarp. And the letter we read today was copied from a manuscript that had belonged to Irenaeus by a man who had known him. The line runs unbroken, from the stadium, hand to hand, down to the page. For decades, Polycarp led the church at Smyrna. He wrote letters of his own. One of them still exists, addressed to the Christians at Philippi. As an old man, he traveled all the way to Rome to meet the bishop there and to argue with him courteously over the date on which Easter should be kept. They did not agree. They parted as friends. And the Roman bishop, out of respect, invited the old man to lead the prayers in his own church. He was gentle, but he was not soft. When he crossed paths with a teacher named Marcion, who was spreading a corrupted version of the faith, Marcion asked the bishop whether he knew who he was. Polycarp said that he did. He said he knew him as the firstborn of Satan. The persecution came during a festival. The crowds were already heated with games and blood, and they began to call for the Christians. Then they called for their leader by name. Polycarp did not want to run. His people persuaded him to withdraw to a small farm outside the city where he spent his days in prayer. 3 days before the end, while he was praying, he saw his pillow catch fire and burn away to nothing. He turned to the men with him and said calmly that he understood. He was to be burned alive. When the soldiers found him, he did not resist. He ordered food and drink set out for them, for the men who had come to take him, and asked only for an hour to pray before they left. They gave it to him. He prayed for 2. They brought him into the stadium. The proconsul, a Roman official named Statius Quadratus, did what the law required. He urged the old man to save himself. Have respect for your age, he said. Swear by the emperor, curse Christ, and I will let you go. And Polycarp gave the answer that has been remembered ever since. 86 years I have served him, he said, and he has never done me wrong. How can I curse my king who saved me? He had served Christ for the whole of his long life. He was not going to deny him in the last hour of it. The proconsul threatened him with fire. Polycarp answered that the fire of an hour was nothing beside the fire that waits for the unrepentant. He told the man to do what he had come to do. The fire was built around him. And here the men who wrote the letter strained to describe what they saw. They said the flames bent into an arch like a sail filled with wind and stood around him without touching him. They said the smell that reached them was not of burning, but of bread baking, of incense. When the fire would not do its work, an executioner was sent in with a blade. The blood that flowed put out the flames. He was dead. The thing they had come to do was done. What the Christians did next mattered as much as the death. They gathered up his bones, more precious to them, the letter says, than gold, and they resolved to come together each year on the day he died to remember him. As far as the written record reaches, this is the first time we see it done, the keeping of the bones, the marking of the day. The veneration of the saints, as the Church would come to practice it for the next 2,000 years, begins in the documentary record here, with an old man and a fire and a letter. He had stood in the same room as men who had seen Jesus. A boy named Irenaeus stood in the same room as him and remembered it and wrote it down, and the line did not break there either. It runs hand to hand all the way down to the letter you have just heard, and past it to here. He is one witness. There were many before him. There have been many since.